Hello, my name is Mickey McIntyre, and I will be presenting with Samantha Martin and Andrea Wilson on a study that we did on the effects of parental addiction on college students. As has been made aware through multiple accounts, whether it be on the news or hearing it from a friend or acquaintance, uh, addiction in general, substance abuse disorders, are a massive problem in the United States and a growing problem. According to Lipari and Van Horn, in 2014, over 20 million, be 20.2 exactly, million adults in the United States aged 18 or over struggled with a substance use disorder. And if it's any indication based on what we know over the past half decade or so, I would guess that this number has only increased over the past few years. And so there has been little research done on the long-term impact of specifically parental addictions on college-age children. And so Samantha, Andrea, and I have found this to be very important, and we believe that there's a lot of potential to be had for this research in terms of its applications to addiction treatments and also prevention and education. So we believe that this research is very valuable in this way, and it addresses a serious problem that's going on. This research necessitates a number of questions on specifically the impact on college students that parental addiction can have. So the criteria that we're going to be looking at in this study at college students specifically are academic performance, alcohol use attitudes and behaviors, social interactions, and then finally well-being and overall mental health. We believe that these four criteria comprise an adequate amount of effects that we may or may not be able to see as a result of parental addiction. So stemming off of these research questions, we formulated a number of hypotheses that we predict comparing ACODAs and non-ACODAs, as we will call them. The ACODAs being the children who have parents with addiction, and then the non-ACODAs being the opposite students who do not have parents with an addiction. So when we compare ACODAs and non-ACODAs, we hypothesize that the ACODAs will struggle more academically, report more problematic alcohol-related attitudes and behaviors, perceive their social interactions as less enjoyable, and then also exhibit declines in well-being and mental health. So we kind of predict the worse outcomes in general for ACODAs compared to non-ACODAs. For this study, we were able to recruit a total of 71 undergraduate students from the University of Mount Union to participate. The vast majority of the participants were female, that being 59 out of the 71, and then also a vast majority were Caucasian, 62 out of 71. Most of the participants were either in their first, second, or fourth year of college, with the plurality being in their second year. However, there was a fairly even distribution between years of college, so there wasn't too much of a discrepancy there overall. In terms of the ages of the participants, most ranged in the traditional college age, with one outlier being a 49-year-old, but the mean was 20.34 years of age. GPA ranged from 2.0 to 4.0, with a mean of 3.43, and all participants were recruited through SONA, the software that the University of Mount Union traditionally uses to recruit participants online. So now I will hand it over to Andrea, who will discuss the materials, the design, and procedure that we used for this study.
For our materials section, we created a survey. This survey contained 11 different items. Each of these items were used, but not the entirety of them, and some of the questions may have been modified to be more inclusive of the participants. Starting out, we had our informed consent form, which was for participants to indicate they understand the risks and benefits of the study and that they are free to quit the study at any time. Second was the demographics, which gathered their age, year in college, race or ethnicity, and grade point average. Third was the college student subjective well-being questionnaire. This assessed the participants' college academic experience and performance. Fourth was the college life alcohol salience scale. This item assessed the participants' view of alcohol being or not being an important part of the college experience. Fifth was the drinking behavior or perceptions questionnaire. This assessed the participants' use of alcohol, parents and peers' usage and views of alcohol, the outcomes of consuming alcohol, and the participants' efficacy in refusing alcohol. Sixth was the social interaction anxiety scale. This item assessed the participants' social life and quality of it. Seventh was the Beck Depression Inventory 2. This assessed the levels of depression symptoms in the participants. Eighth was the PTSD Symptom Scale Interview. This assessed the participants' experience of trauma and symptoms of said trauma. Ninth was the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7-item scale, which assessed the participants' general anxiety levels. 10th was the Children of Alcoholics Screening Test short form. This assessed the participants' views of their parents' alcohol consumption and usage habits. And lastly, 11th was our debriefing statement, which provided the participants with a thorough explanation of this study, the importance of it, and the contact information of all the researchers in case they had questions or concerns. For our design, we had a between subjects quasi-experimental design. Our independent variables were non-ACOTAs versus ACOTAs, with ACOTAs meaning adult children of a drug or alcohol addicted parent. Our dependent variables were academic performance, alcohol use attitudes and behaviors, perception of social interactions, well-being, and mental health. Our procedure was relatively simple, starting with the access link through Sona Systems. Participants would go from there and would be led to the SurveyMonkey. Then the participant would acknowledge that they have read the informed consent form, and they would then go through and answer the demographic questions and then all of the questionnaires. And once they had finished completing all of those, they would then be issued the debriefing statement.
So going into the results of the survey, we found several measures on which ACOTAs scored higher than non-ACOTAs. ACOTAs scored higher than non-ACOTAs on the Drinking Behavior and Perceptions questionnaire, specifically on the subscales that assess risk factors and negative alcohol expectancies. ACOTAs also scored higher than non-ACOTAs on the Beck Depression Inventory 2, the PTSD Symptom Scale Interview, and the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7-item scale. Interestingly, non-ACOTAs scored higher than ACOTAs on the Children of Alcoholics Screening Test short form. This could either be an anomaly, or it could potentially indicate that perhaps some participants in the non-ACOTA group had parents who had issues with alcohol abuse. So here in Table 1, you can see how the two groups scored on each of the survey measures. As I mentioned before, ACOTAs scored higher than non-ACOTAs on the risk factors and negative alcohol expectancies subscales of the DBPQ. What these high scores indicate is that ACOTAs are more likely to have risk factors associated with future drug or alcohol abuse, but that they are also more likely to expect that drinking leads to negative outcomes, which could be a potential protective factor against problematic drug and alcohol abuse. We can also see that ACOTAs scored higher than non-ACOTAs on all subscales of the PTSD symptom interview, which indicates that they are more likely to struggle with re-experiencing traumatic events, increased arousal, and avoidance of situations that may be triggering. ACOTAs also scored a lot higher on the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7-item scale, which indicates that they're more likely to experience some of the hallmark symptoms of anxiety. On the Beck Depression Inventory, ACOTAs scored higher than non-ACOTAs, indicating that they are more likely to experience symptoms of depression and depressive disorders. One thing that I wanted to point out, however, with the BDI results is that for both groups, the average scores were alarmingly high, which might be indicative of a need for further research into depression in college students. So again, just a bit of an overview on what we just saw. ACOTAs were more likely than non-ACOTAs to have more risk factors for drug and alcohol abuse and more negative alcohol expectancies, more depressive symptoms, more PTSD-related symptoms, and more symptoms of generalized anxiety. In regards to the other measures of the survey, ACOTAs were not more likely than non-ACOTAs to have lower overall well-being, more social anxiety, and worse perceptions of alcohol salience. And then here we have this finding again that really surprised us, which was that non-ACOTAs were more likely than ACOTAs to report having experiences, feelings, and behaviors that were indicative of having an addicted parent. So in order to determine the statistical significance of the differences between the ACOTA and non-ACOTA scores, we used independent samples t-tests. Comparisons that had a p-value higher than 0.05 were considered statistically insignificant. So as you can see, we had p-values lower than 0.05 on the DBPQ risk factors, the DBPQ negative alcohol expectations, the Beck Depression Inventory, all of the PTSD symptom subscales, and the Generalized Anxiety Disorder 7-item scale, indicating statistically significant differences between the two groups. Ultimately, what our results tell us is that ACOTAs were more likely than non-ACOTAs to experience mental health issues, such as depression, anxiety, and post-traumatic stress disorder, which confirms our primary hypothesis. However, our hypothesis that ACOTAs would struggle more with social interaction in a college setting was disconfirmed. These findings have implications for several different groups of people, specifically college administrators, clinicians, parents, and students. For college administrators, this information is important to keep in mind for campus drug and alcohol abuse prevention efforts. For clinicians, specifically those who work with college students, these findings may indicate that clients who have dealt with parental addiction will have unique needs that should be considered when providing mental health treatment. Finally, these findings also have implications for parents and students themselves, who may benefit from being made aware of the impact that parental addiction can have on the mental health of college students. While these findings are certainly interesting and warrant further research, there are some limitations which may have impacted the scope and results of the study. Specifically, because this is an undergraduate study, our population was limited to students here at the University of Mount Union. As a result, our sample size of ACOTAs was much smaller than the sample size of non-ACOTAs, which may have had an impact on the results. Finally,